In the last video we made this sculpture, and if you'll recall, I started with a comp, a little oil clay comp, and he did his job. Everything I needed to do I got from him, and so it's time to say goodbye to the oil comp. He did his job, it's no longer needed, and we're done with him. When painting a sculpture, the fastest way for me to do it is to do a color comp first. And I just brought a photograph of the elephant here into Procreate, and I'm just sketching color on top of it. It's a lot of fun, it's easy to do, and it saves a lot of time when you're actually painting the sculpture. Okay, it's time to prime. I'm just using Rust-Oleum flat white primer. It's the kind that bonds to plastic, and I find that it makes a really good intermediate coat between the plastic parts and the artist's acrylic paint that I use to put on the color. It's always worked really well for me. I've never had any adhesion issues or anything like that with the paint. So it's my habit to prime the parts, and I'm going to keep doing it. Now that the parts are primed, they're ready to paint. But they're small, and they're hard to hold. And that is where blue tack comes in handy. Get out the old blue tack. It's also called fun tack in some places. It's basically just this sticky rubber. And it's genius for what we use it for, which is take a matchstick. I just use matchsticks because they're handy and they're cheap and I have them. And I cut the heads off the matches. You don't need the heads. Don't want the heads. Stick a little lump of blue tack on the end and mash it. Brilliant. And then when you have them stuck on the stick with the blue tack, you put them in this handy dandy holder. This yellow plastic strainer, I found it abandoned on the beach. It's a kid's toy. And just looking at it the other day, I went, oh, look at that. I have a perfect use for that. In the past, I've held my parts using things like an old cardboard box or a lump of clay. All right, I've got my wet palette system here. And it's just basically permanently wet, never dries out. And we'll start with the biggest forms, start with the biggest shapes. Got my brushes, and my brushes are not the, these are not the finest brushes made by the human species, I can tell you. They're basically just cheapy brushes, craft store brushes. Let's pick out a brush, let's get it wet, and let's start with the water. Just start by laying on a base coat. Nothing fancy. I'm not looking to completely cover or coat in one go. I like to use layers, especially on something like this, part like this. I will definitely be painting this water in layers. It's just going to make it nicer. All right, I'm going to paint the underside. This is one of the things, another thing I do. I usually try to paint the least important side first, like the underside, and I feather. I don't want to see paint edges, paint ridges where I don't want them. So I feather the paint. Same thing on the head. I'm going to paint on the underside first. All right, beautiful. That one's done. And now the body base is a light orange. It's a pale orange, and since I just had yellow ochre in my brush, I don't really need to cleaning the brush. Just go forward. Nice. See, by doing it this way, we keep a lot of parts in play, and we keep moving forward, and we don't have to stop and wait. One of the things that I like to do is I like to use a paper towel, get the water out of my brush. Can't stand it when my brush is loaded with water. Drives me mental. This isn't the most ideal brush for a little part like that. Good rule of thumb in painting, use the biggest possible brush for the job, because that way you cover the things the fastest. But this brush is a tiny bit of overkill for this little tiny part, but no biggie. Not a problem. And then this goes over here like that in my genius system. The most important tool in your arsenal is a handy dandy hair dryer. Oh my God, you just simply cannot paint without a hair dryer. It makes such an enormous difference in speed. Just like that. Those parts are dry. It's pretty rare for me to nail the color on the first attempt. As I put the layers on and build the layers, I tend to change the color and try to modify it to see if I can refine it and get it closer to what the final look should be. And just keep experimenting, really, and changing the color. You'll see, like on this piece, the pink that I'm painting on now is quite a bit lighter than the original pink. On the water, I'm going to put on a really dark wash, thin wash of phthalo blue. It's very, very transparent blue, but I just want to get the phthalo to go down into the dark recesses. Okay, so that's pretty wet and pretty dark. So everything's wet now, so let's go ahead and hit it with the hair dryer. Since I'm mixing paint on the palette and not like mixing up jars of color or anything like that, I tend to get some variegation in the colors. So you can really see the variegation there. I'm not too worried about the end where I'm painting out here because it's going to be jammed into the other part and you'll never see it. All right, let's add several coats on it now, and it's getting pretty opaque. Nice. Can start in on some of these small parts, and we'll just do the tusks since they're simple enough, being white. I don't want to be too literal. That's why I'm not painting the elephant gray. I mean, notice most elephants are not really pink and yellow. So I get a low score on the realism component. All right, let's see about painting these ears. There's a little bit of leverage on these ears when I paint them because they stick out so far from the stick that I'm holding. So I was having trouble on projects getting the blue tack to hold a larger, longer part like this on the stick. So what I wound up doing is I wound up just using 5-minute epoxy to really glue it onto the stick. And that's working great because it's not coming off. Another really good reason to paint all the big forms first, or the largest ones first, is then you can start assembling the character and looking at how all the colors are working. And if they need to be darker or lighter or some other color, or if you want to make changes, that's the time to do it on the big forms. And then you can go on to eyeballs and eyebrows, little tiny detail-y things that don't really affect the overall composition. The lips are the same turquoise as the ears, but I'm going to start them by painting the inside of the mouth, because once you can see I'm making a big mess. You're not going to be able to paint the down in the inside of the mouth without making a mess, so I always paint the crevices first. What a fine rule. Paint the crevices first. Get these eyebrows painted up. What is on there? Can't have that. Can't have snurds. Okay, we're fine. I had a snurd on my eyebrow. My beautiful elephant eyebrow. Boy, that paint is translucent, isn't it? That orange is spectacularly translucent. Not the most opaque color. Well, that's why we paint coats. Experimental time. Let's see if I can just scumble some light blue over this water and see what it's going to look like. Just kind of dry brushing to bring out the texture. See if we like it, but we can always go back and forth. I can always knock it down with a glaze. All right, let's get these eyeballs painted up. Again, we're working with this orange, which sets some kind of human record for transparency. All right, take a couple coats on those, but we'll get it. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I'm always wondering if what I'm going to do is going to work. It's like I never know ahead of time. Can never predict. I try stuff, often it's a catastrophic failure, and I go on to the next thing. All right, this is where my flood technique comes in. I just mix up the white paint pretty thin and flow it into the recess and let it find the edges more or less by itself. And we can return to this mouth. And see if we can cut the edges nice. Whenever I'm painting a pattern, I generally start on the bottom or the least conspicuous side of a shape, area, whatever, That way I can practice. And also I can see if I like it. I don't want to paint anything that's critical unless I know I like the pattern. Okay, I got the pattern on the face. Beautiful, looking fantastic. Painting the black eyeball was simple enough because it's a little raised bump in the center of the eye, so it made it really easy just to float the black paint on. I cannot tell you how many variations I did on painting this water. I finally settled on just various values of ultramarine blue because it was simple and clean looking and seemed to work best with the piece. Even though I made a color comp, I made this little mock-up, just painted it directly on my work surface table on the paper, and that way I could fiddle with the eye color without having to stick the eyes to the head and getting blue tack, gumminess on there and all that stuff. As you can see, I'm brightening up the yellow by putting a very thin wash of yellow over the lighter, whiter base yellow. Glazes are a really good way to modify color. You can either darken them or brighten them, do a lot of stuff. Just with really thin, transparent glazes over a base color. I've actually used that technique quite a bit on this piece. Let's put our boy together. Here we go. Stick him on. Blue tack is doing its job. All right, let's get the eyebrows on there. Nice. All the pieces are being stuck on with our handy blue tack, which we love. Get those things stuck on there. Nice. Let's get his little water in place. Fantastic. Ears. Very nice. All right. Okay, we got the top part. Let's do the bottom part, which is just tusks. Get the other tusk jammed in. Don't want to jam him in upside down. Jam that thing in there. Okay, now we got our tusks in. Put the little happy mouth on. Don't want to mung up the eyebrows. Very easy to mung up. All right. He is looking pretty cute. Where's his body at? Here we go. Pod. Put the spine in. Get him attached. And finally, on the base he goes. And there's our kid right there. He's looking pretty warped. Holy moly. I'm going to push him around here. Get him in there better. All right. There you go. Now he's looking all right. All right, there's our kid, all done, looking pretty good. Hey, I hope you had fun watching this movie. I hope you got something out of it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.